Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Microsoft 365 Copilot webinar on this sunny Tuesday afternoon. I hope everyone's in good spirits. My name's Mike Tansey. I'm Head of Sales at Chess, and with me today I have the brilliant James Mallalieu, our Senior AI and Microsoft 365 Consultant. In today's session, James and I will be running through some Microsoft 365 Copilot demos, sharing the latest and greatest from Microsoft and removing some of the mystery around the different flavors of licensing and versions of Copilot. By the end of today, we really hope that you'll leave feeling enthused about the toolset and may have even picked up a trick or two that you'll be able to use on a daily basis. So it's important to note this is a 3-part webinar series, so please come join us along for the journey. The links for the next 2 events have been shared in the chat, so do register those when you get a chance. For those that haven't been to a chess webinar before, I'll run you through just a little bit of housekeeping. So firstly, the session is being recorded, a copy of which will be made available to you tomorrow. We will also be sending out those slides as well. For any questions, we're saving 15 minutes at the end of the webinar, but if you want to post your questions as you go, so don't forget them, please use the Q&A tab at the top of the screen. And finally, we're offering a one-to-one workshop for each of the companies here today. Now, this is a consultant-led session to discuss your specific Microsoft 365 Copilot scenarios with James and the team. So to take us up on this, simply tick the request follow-up box on the survey or scan the QR code at the end, and one of the team will be in touch. Before I hand over to James, I'll just cover a quick overview to Chess. So for those that are less familiar with us around the room, so Chess are one of the UK's leading independent technology service providers. We're dedicated to making it easy for businesses to work securely, anywhere, anytime. We have a team of 280 IT professionals supporting over 18,000 customers, and we turn over just over 50 million annually. So we offer a comprehensive range of services really across 6 key areas. So going down each of the coloured out ribbons on the screen in order. So Connect for your internet, mobile, voice and data needs. Cloud for infrastructure, platform and software as a service offerings. Devices for your laptops, hardware and networking. Digital services, what we're here to talk about today, so for 365, Power Platform and AI, as well as the data services. Security for those end-to-end services ranging from pen tests and cyber essentials right the way through to managed SOCs, combined with the strength of our sister company CyberLab. And lastly, professional services, so providing consultancy, project management, user adoption and managed services. And really our mission at Chess is to help businesses reduce costs, protect data and work better together using technology. And we achieve this through forming those long-term partnerships based on trust and results. And I think that's why most of the customers registered on the webinar today have been with us 15 years or more. And that's Chess in a slide. So I'd now like to hand over to James to kick off the webinar. James, over to you, please.
Thanks, Mike, and welcome everyone to today's session. So my name's James, and over the next 40 minutes or so, we're going to be talking all things Copilot. So I'm going to start with something that was a relatively recent announcement earlier in the year by Microsoft, and some people are aware of this, some people aren't, but it's a key thing, that Copilot for 365 comes in 2 flavors. We have what's called Copilot Chat, and this edition of Copilot is available to everyone who has a Microsoft 365 license. So if you're currently licensed for Business Premium or 365 Enterprise, then this will be included as part of your licensing. Additionally, there's a paid for subscription, and this is called Microsoft 365 Copilot. Now, I am going to talk briefly about the differences, but one of the things that they both share is enterprise data protection. And this means that the prompts that people use for Copilot and the responses that Copilot generates are not being used to train any large language models. They come within the protection that your overall Microsoft 365 environment provides. And I think that's a key point for organizations looking to understand about what AI tools potentially they should use. So for a quick demo, I'm going to go in and show Microsoft Copilot Chat. So this is the free edition. Now, how I typically explain this is most people on a daily basis or weekly basis will go to a search tool such as Google or Microsoft Bing and they will do a search because they're looking to research something. They're looking to find out some information. And if you think about how Google works, I type in what I'm looking for, and Google will present to me a set of links to web pages or documents that may contain the answer I'm looking for. If I compare that to how Copilot chat works, I can type in a question, and you can see here I've typed in a question, tell me about Chess ICT, a brief history, key services, and 5 interesting facts. Now, when I press go, effectively what's happening is Copilot is understanding the intent of what I'm asking. It's going out to the internet, so information that exists in the public domain, to attempt to find the answers to the questions I've asked, and then it's constructing an answer. So if you compare this with my previous statement about Google, I do a search, Google points me to a set of documents or pages that I've then got to go and open and find the answer. Copilot's kind of allowed me to do all of those steps together. Now, what's also interesting is because Copilot's actually constructed this response, so you can see it's taken my prompt and it said, well, here's your brief history, here's your key services, here's your 5 interesting facts. I can then ask it subsequent questions of this content. So, for instance, an example I might say is rewrite this for a social media post targeting new clients, make it persuasive. Luckily, it's very good at understanding my poor spelling and engaging. Okay. So I can do that. What it's going to do is it's going to rewrite the content it's previously written, but taking my instructions to rewrite it. So it's making it more of a social media post. It's basically saying, okay, it's going to target new clients, make it persuasive and engaging. And this, although it's a very simple example, this is what I use Copilot a lot for on a daily, weekly basis, is to help me produce content. So either content that already exists that I'm researching in the public domain, or a piece of content that I want it to rewrite. And the same can be true. I can ask it additional questions, so make it more concise, etc. Or if I'm targeting, say, my colleagues over in Italy, I can say translate this to Italian, and it'll do a good job of translating it. So that essentially is Copilot Chat. So it's the free edition. It allows me to generate content. It allows me to research information that's in the public domain. And it provides the enterprise data protection that ensures my communications with it and the responses it's generated aren't going out to train large language models. Now, if we then contrast that with Microsoft 365 Copilot, this essentially adds 2 additional capabilities. The first is that it's integrated into all of my desktop tools, so be it Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook, Teams. And second, it has access to the content within Microsoft 365 that I have access to. So what this diagram's alluding to is that these applications have Copilot enabled within them, as you'll see in a moment. And when I ask questions of it, Copilot has access to the content that I have access to. So be it emails within my mailbox, files within SharePoint or OneDrive, and within Teams, chats and channel conversations. So if we have a quick look at that in action, I'll start by going to Outlook. So this isn't my real inbox. So there's a whole load of kind of fictitious emails in here. But something that I use it for every day is to summarize emails. So like most people, we all get a lot of emails, and sometimes those emails comprise of an ongoing conversation that I've been copied in 20 conversations deep. And I quickly want to get a feel for what it's about. So the summary by Copilot will use Copilot to give me a summarization of what the email is about. So we can see here, this email is about the latest updates on Microsoft 365 Copilot, and it kind of just includes a brief summary. If I contrast that to, say, this email and do summarize. So you provided the latest feedback from Trustpilot and a summary of our marketing campaign results. Interesting. What are those marketing campaign results? So I click summarize this file, and this is going to go away and provide me a summary of what's in that file. So this is basically saying, I'll just wait for it to finish. This is some feedback on our pizza delivery service, and basically saying, based on your feedback, you got some positive feedback, you got some negative feedback, and this is the sentiment analysis, and here's some recommendations on how to improve the service. So it's helpful for me in terms of understanding what's in emails quickly. The next thing I'd use it for is within my calendar. I get invited to quite a lot of meetings, as I'm sure you all do. So one of the things I use it quite a lot for is when I hover over a meeting, you see I've got this option that says prepare with Copilot. So this allows me to look at a meeting, and what Copilot will do is go away and find out from previous communications about the meeting, documents and meeting recordings. It will give me a summarization of what that meeting's about. If I take a meeting weekly reporting, this is our feedback from our pizza delivery feedback. So this is the objective of this meeting, to review the latest feedback. There's a task to review the pizza feedback documents. So I use this a lot in preparing for meetings that I've got coming up. What about meetings I've attended, or what about meetings I am attending? So most of my kind of working week is in meetings, and I tend to record a lot of the meetings that I attend. And the reason for that is twofold. One, it means that I can concentrate on what's being discussed in the meeting. I'm not scribbling notes on a piece of paper. Secondly, I can go back to the meeting and I can ask questions of the meeting. So say, for instance, the meeting that I had to leave early or I arrived late, I can go back to the recording and I can ask questions of the meeting. So if I go back to the meeting I had last week, and you can see here, I've now got the option that says view recap. If we click this, this will take me to the recording of this meeting. So I could watch the recording of the meeting. However, what Copilot's done for me is generated a summary of the discussion. So you can see here, these are the points being raised. I can drill into it to understand a bit more about what was discussed. And this is so much more useful than the transcript, because essentially a transcript contains a lot of language that we as humans use that effectively is noise, and this distills it down into the key points being discussed. No follow-up tasks were discussed at the meeting, but this gives me a summary of the meeting. Now, one other thing that I can do is I might be looking for a very specific piece of information that was asked. And I can then go to Copilot and I can ask the question of Copilot. So in this case, I've said, what are the 3 key benefits of Copilot discussed? And this is going through transcript and it's bringing back to me those points that were discussed in the meeting, along with what we call a citation that tells me where that information came from. So very useful for recording meetings and documenting meetings, and then using the recording to subsequently go back and ask questions of it. Now, if we move into some document scenarios, so quite common one would be, say, Microsoft Word documents. And I would use Copilot in 2 ways. One, is I'm reading or reviewing a document that someone else has provided to me. So they may have sent me a document, they may be asking me to proofread a document, or I might be preparing for a meeting with a client. So when I open the document in Word, it generates a summary, pretty much like I showed you earlier with emails, but with a summary for the document instead of the email. So I can decide what type of summary I want, brief, standard, or detailed. This is the brief one. And a relatively new feature is also called Insights, and this will extract key insights from the document, if it has them. So you can see here, key insight was the date the document was published, and then it said, well, here's some questions and answers about the document that I might be thinking of answering it. Okay. Now I could take one of these questions anyway, and then just use the Ask Copilot. So I can ask a question of this document. And it's going to go through the document and give me a response based on the question I've asked it. So this is very useful, particularly for longer documents where you want to find bits of information or you want a summary of it. And this will respond to me and show me the place in the document where that particular content is taken from. Now, if you're authoring documents, a key thing that you can use Copilot to do, not only to research the topic you may be authoring, but to help you fine-tune what you've written. So I tend to, when I write documents, I'll put all my thoughts down in the document, and then I will try and make them more concise and more cohesive. So a way I can do that with Copilot is I can say, I can ask it a question, auto rewrite, make suggestions, make it shorter, make it longer, or actually pose a question to say, can you rewrite this more for a target client of X or something like that. But in this case, I thought an interesting one to have a look at is make suggestions. So this content's already been written. So I might think, okay, as a last process, I'm just going to see what Copilot thinks of the content that I've written. So you can see here that the passage effectively outlines the recent popularity, etc., etc. However, it could benefit from more detailed analysis and clarity in certain areas. So it gives me some suggestions. Now, I don't have to take these suggestions, clearly, but it's a useful way of reviewing and previewing content before you issue it. So that's an example in Word. If we then go across to, say, Excel, now I'm what I would call an average Excel user. So I know a little bit about Excel, but I'm certainly not well versed when it comes to producing formulas and doing all of the formatting and everything that you might need to do when you're working with Excel. So one of the things I can use Copilot to do is help me write formulas, or actually in this case, help me suggest formulas. So this is some data that relates to a series of marketing campaigns. Just zoom in slightly. And we've got a number of campaigns run by a person. We've got a campaign name, the date it was done, what type of campaign it was, budget, revenue, the number of users we targeted with the campaign, and the number of users we actually engaged. So if I go to here and select Copilot and say, suggest a formula column, what it's going to do is look at the data, attempt to understand what the data is, what it relates to, and then give me a suggestion on a formula that I could add into this workbook. Now I'm hoping, because I've done this before, that it's going to suggest that it adds a formula that works out the percentage of engaged users over the total numbers of users. Now you might say, well, that's a pretty simple formula to write. I agree, it probably is. But other formulas are less simple. And I often struggle with writing formulas, so I'm hoping it will come back with this. Oh, it's struggling itself apparently today. So I'll give it one more go at doing that. It's just a formula column. And if this doesn't work, I will move on. Just while it's doing that, it's decided to work. So what it said to me, looking at the columns, here's one formula column to review and insert. Key point, it doesn't do this for me. It's always going to ask me as the user, are you sure you want me to do this? So it won't just go and update my workbook. So it's going to say, I'm going to add an engagement rate column, which will calculate the engagement rate of each campaign by dividing the number of users engaged by the total number of users targeted. That's the formula, okay? I can get an explanation if I want to know how that formula works, and I can say insert column. Now, what I find particularly useful is people send me workbooks that have formulas in, and so I can click on a column and I can say, explain how this formula works to me, and it will do the reverse of what I've just shown you. It will go through and it will basically tell me what the formula is doing and how it works. Now, I can do all sorts of conditional formatting with my workbook, but one of the things I often want to do is just show me some insights. Now, I'm being unspecific. I'm just saying, have a look at this and tell me what you can find. So it's going to look at the workbook. It's going to work out what relationships there are. And it's saying, okay, here's a chart that says by date, what was the budget spent? Now, that may not be that useful to me. So I'm actually going to say, okay, go away and look for all the insights and add them into a workbook, which is I've already done. And this is what it's done here. So it's constructed these insights based on my data and put a pivot table onto here to allow me to then use these charts to filter the data. So some interesting facts. It potentially told me that this campaign, product review 3x, has noticeably higher engaged users. And it's also telling me that digital marketing accounts for the majority of the revenue. Okay, so that's some things I can do with Excel. If I go on to PowerPoint, let's say I want to generate a PowerPoint presentation. So I can select a theme, and this theme can be an organization theme that you've published or one of the Microsoft ones that are available. So let's pick this one. And then I'm going to say, create a presentation from this file. So that was the file we were looking at before in Word. It gave me some insights into this protein shake. Now I can give other information about how I want it to generate the presentation, but I'm just going to click go. So the first thing it will do is it'll look at the file and it will work out what are all the key sections, what are all the key topics within that document. So you can see that's what it's done here. Now it hasn't yet generated the slides. It basically gives me the opportunity to add new topics in here, maybe reorder things if I want to reorder things. Maybe I don't want to talk about some of the things, so I'll just delete it. But I'm going to go with what it suggested. And then click generate slides. And it's going to go away. It's going to build the slides. It will use the template I provided. And it'll add the content from the document into the slide deck. Now, I'm hoping this is relatively quick, but sometimes it can take a couple of minutes. So if it's looking like it's taking too long, of course, I've got an example I prepared earlier. You can see what it's doing here, generating slides, populating content on the slides, some of the slides that will put images in. I can then say, yep, that looks good. And then we can go and have a look at what it's generated for me. I'm not going to run through all the slides because it's probably not that interested unless you're interested in health protein shakes. But you can see what it's done. It's taken content from the document. It's added slides. It's added topic slides. And It may not be the final product that I want in respect of the PowerPoint, but it gives me a good starting point, and it saved me a ton of time in getting to this point. Okay, so a couple of other points just generally in documents. Sometimes I want to look at multiple documents, or I want to do something that involves multiple documents, okay, not just a single document. So an example could be, I've got a set of reports here, and these are all quite long reports. So for instance, this report, if I open it, is 47 pages. So what I want it to do is I want to take 3 reports, and I could ask it to summarize, but I'm not going to do that because I want to be more specific as to what I'm asking of it. So I'm going to ask a question, which it'll pose to all the documents, and then it'll generate me a response. So I can say, what are the 3 key takeaways from these documents? Keep so brief and targeted towards the audience. So it's going to go through the content of the documents. I'm hoping, according to my brief, it will keep it brief, which it has. AI boosts, yes. Looks pretty good. But the thing I really wanted it always needs to be slightly pirate themed. Let's see what it makes of that. Very good. AI be boosting productivity and treasure. So this is just a simple example of how I might use AI to reason over not just one document, but a whole collection of documents. So let me just go quickly back to my slides. Okay, so the key thing there, the Copilot chat reasons on content that exists in the public domain, and the Copilot, which is a paid-for subscription, has access to the content that you as an individual have access to within your Microsoft 365 environment. Okay, we'll talk a little bit about licensing in a moment. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is AI agents. And effectively, these are tools that you can provide within your environment that allow people to either find information, seek best practice, undertake tasks, etc., etc. Okay. Now, effectively, building agents is very straightforward, and I'll show you a simple example of this. Let me show you an example of an agent in action. So I'm just going to start a new chat. Now, if I was looking for information about my employment with Chess, terms and conditions, guidance, procedures, processes, then I want to ensure that the information I receive as an employee is authoritative, accurate, and up to date. So one of the ways we can do that is by providing an agent that is simply, its task is to respond to questions about a specific topic using the authoritative content. So in my example, I've got my people agent. So when I ask it, then it's not looking at content in the internet on the public domain. It's not looking at content that I have access to across the whole of the 365 environment. It is specifically looking at the content that I've told this agent to, which is our employee handbook and other associated documents. So you can see here, it's given me a very specific answer about our dress code policy, which if I hover over the citation, tells me where that information comes from. Now I could follow that up and I can say, address. Disappointingly, it just looks like I can't wear fancy dress. So that ensures that when people are asking questions, I'm getting that authoritative answer. Okay. Now, let me just contrast that quickly. So I'm not going to go into the agent. I'm going to go back to Copilot and I'm just going to ask a question across all of the content that I have access to. Now we're talking. So employees are encouraged to express creativity of the individual through their attire. Playful accessories like colourful ties or statement jewellery. This is especially welcomed in customer-facing scenarios. Now, this document is not the right document. This is a document that I, as an individual, have authored, okay? And therefore I have access to it. So I've written my own fancy dress, dress for my day, working day policy. But it's returned to me because I've got access to it. When I go to the agent, however, it's not returned, okay, because it's not the authoritative document. And so one of the things, and it's one of the things that we will cover more detail in our follow-up webinar, is how to understand about ensuring that Copilot answers authoritatively, with authoritative content, and you don't end up with situations where people are getting guidance that's coming from basically made up content. Okay. Now, this agent, I've accessed it whilst I've been in Microsoft 365 Copilot. But it may be for your organization, you have an intranet and you're thinking, well, it'd be great to have an agent that's integrated into our intranet. So in my example here, I have a very simple SharePoint kind of intranet, which provides information to people working for the organization about working for the organization. Now, if I was looking for my dress code policy here, traditionally with a SharePoint site, I would have three options. I can do a search. So I can do a search for fancy dress. Doesn't return anything to me. I can hope that someone's put a link in the navigation to dress code policy, or perhaps someone's put a link on the page to allow me to find, maybe it's in culture, so I'll click through to that. Maybe it's in policies and procedures, okay? The point being, it's me clicking through, it's me doing searches, it's a lot of effort. But if you look up here, there's a Copilot icon. And that's because Copilot for SharePoint has been enabled. And so my SharePoint site automatically has its own agent. And the agent is making use of the information that exists in that individual SharePoint site. So if I now ask the question, it's not going to be using my fancy dress code policy, which actually exists in my OneDrive. It is only going to use the content that exists in this site, which fortunately is managed by responsible people in our people team. So this is our dress code policy done there. Now, you might be thinking that that's great, that's super useful, but it all sounds very complicated. It's not as complicated as it would seem. So I can go into here and I can say, I'm going to build an agent. Now, there's a few steps to this, but the main thing is essentially thinking about what is the content that you want your agent to use as the basis of answering questions. So you can see here, I can specify a whole SharePoint site, or I can select individual document libraries or folders. So I might have an individual, I might just say, this is just going to be based on these documents. Or I might say, pick everything in that folder, okay? I can add content from other locations as well. So I can bring together the set of documents that make up that authoritative collection of documents that I want Copilot to answer based on its questions. And then finally, I can give it some behavior characteristics. So provide helpful, accurate, relevant information while maintaining a professional and courteous tone. Pretty good. But what I might say, information, I'll just change this in the style of a pirate. Obviously, you wouldn't do this, but you get the idea. So it can respond to your prompts as such. So let's just see if it, actually, let me ask the question fancy first. Another fancy first. Now that seems very piratey to me. So I would then save that, and I can then elect to share that agent with the people I elect to want to share it with. Now, an important point, the agent will only respond to content that the user issuing the prompt has rights to see. So if someone comes to this site and doesn't have rights to some of the content the agent is pointing at, it will not respond using content that the user does not have rights to see. So effectively what I'm saying is your governance and your permissions that you apply to the documents are always withheld. Copilot doesn't override any of that. Okay, so a couple of questions, because this being a Microsoft product obviously means licensing is sometimes confusing. So effectively, anyone can build and use an agent who has a 365 license. However, some of the capabilities within the agent you cannot use unless you have a Microsoft 365 Copilot license, i.e. the paid for license, or you enable what we call a pay-as-you-go scenario, which is effectively you pay based on consumption usage. You get a monthly bill and you're charged for your usage. So in my example of my people agent, users would either need a 365 Copilot license or users would need to be covered by a pay-as-you-go license. Okay, so there's some things to think about if you want to make use of agents. It depends on what the agent does. It depends on where the agent is experienced from. That will determine how to license it. So, quick summary in terms of what we've covered. So the Copilot chat, as I said, is free. And anyone in your organization that has a Microsoft 365 Business Premium, E3, E5, E1, they will have access to this license. And the important thing about it is it provides that enterprise data protection. If you want these users to have access to agents, apart from the most basic of agents, you need to then license on a pay-as-you-go basis. So you get charged, as I said, based on consumption. If you want some of your users to have the experience of Copilot that's integrated into your applications, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Teams, and you want Copilot to have access to the information that exists within your mailbox, within SharePoint, within OneDrive, within Teams, then you need to license users for this edition. okay, which is costed £24 per user per month. This also includes the AI agents, okay, so they're licensed for that as well. There is some discounting available if you're looking at this. If you buy more than 10 licenses, some Microsoft discounting available for it. But it is an annual commitment. So you can't just say, I'm going to try it for a month. You are committed to doing it for a year. So my recommendations. A lot of times when I speak to people about AI, they're, okay, we're going to go away and think about this. Of course, you need to go away and think about it. But please remember that there'll be people in your organization today that are using AI tools today with potentially sensitive information that exists within your organization. So absolutely, you need to issue guidance to people about what they can and cannot do. And ideally, you need to provide them with a set of secure, integrated tools that mean if they do want to use AI, they can use it in the confidence that they're not exposing your sensitive data to the outside world. Obviously, that leads me on to point 2, which is, well, if you're going to provide them a secure tool, you might as well provide them with 365 Copilot Chat, okay? Because, you know, unless you're not licensed for Microsoft 365 in any way, you're already licensed for it. And that gives you your entry point into giving people a tool that they can use to research information, to generate content, in the secure knowledge that that information is not being shared. My third point is you absolutely have to provide education and support. You know, there are people who are enthusiasts and they will grab these tools and they'll already be using them, right? And you probably won't need to tell them anything. But there will be a significant proportion of people that will be nervous, will have some trepidation, and will need some helping hands in terms of understanding how they as an individual can use AI tools such as this to help them with their daily work. And my last point is that if you are looking at the paid for license, and therefore you are allowing Copilot to access the content that you have in your Microsoft 365 environment, there are some considerations: out-of-date content, non-authoritative content, overshared content, sensitive content. Now, these aren't reasons to not go ahead with Copilot, but there are a few things you need to be aware. I briefly alluded to my fancy dress example of how non-authoritative content can be surfaced by Copilot because the user legitimately has access to it, okay? And in the webinars that we are going to talk about, our second webinar does cover that in quite a lot more detail. Now, in respect of helping organizations to make their journey forward with AI tools, we have what we've called a set of accelerators. And these are essentially designed to help people jumpstart where they want to be in terms of their use of AI. Now, these are geared up for different sizes of organization, different aspirations. So some organizations are very keen to do some data readiness assessment to understand a bit about the content in your environment, the risks that Copilot might present to them. Some organizations want to go ahead, enable Copilot Chat. They want to have some training provided. They want some support on the way. And that's really where the sort of basic one is focused. So these are there just to get people started, whether that's a small number of people or broader kind of adoption across the organization. And we can provide some details of these after. So with that said, Mike, would you like to just wrap up and provide some information about the webinars?
I would. Thank you, James. Really good session. Lots of useful tips there. I really like the prepare for a meeting with Copilot functionality. I think that could certainly help me the next time I get dropped into a meeting last minute and I see a chunky briefing document in there. And it was also really good just to see the AI agents in action. So yeah, thank you very much, James. Just talk about what's on the screen. So before we dive into the Q&A, just a reminder, this is a 3-part webinar series. So on the 3rd of June, we'll be running the 2nd part webinar where we'll be talking about the importance of getting your data AI ready. We'll also be discussing some of the practical strategies to reduce some of the potential risks with Copilot. So certainly one, if you've got data protection, if you've got people that are concerned about the impact of Copilot, it is coming, it's already here. Join the webinar and see how you can work with it. And then the 3rd webinar, so on the 12th of June, we'll be running the webinar focused around preparing your people for a smooth adoption of Copilot. It's one thing deploying technology or just turning it on, but our experience is you need to give the people guidance. You need to show them some scenarios. You need to make it work for them and answer the question, what's in it for me? So it's a lot of money per month per user. So really want to make sure you hit the ground running. So again, we'll also be exploring some of the key risks to the users and how to mitigate those in the webinar series. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and paste those links in the chat now. So if you do want to register, and then we can, there we go, it should be in there now. And we'll just move on to the next slide and touch on the feedback and Q&A. So I'd like to ask everyone who's got a phone in front of them to kindly scan the QR code and just give us a bit of feedback, tell us how we did. There is an option there to book a session directly with James. This is a free of charge session. It's technically led and it's to run through your Microsoft 365 Copilot scenario. It's great as a sounding board to get some advice from someone who's living and breathing Copilot with lots of experience of different industries as well. And if you have any questions on any of the accelerators, again, please let us know. So we've got approximately 15 minutes left. So we're now diving into some questions. So if you can paste them in the Q&A section, we'll just run through those in order. So I can see there's a few already in there, James. So let me just call them out. So can you restrict access to agents you create to specific users? Great question.
Yes. So in the SharePoint agent example I showed, the actual agent file itself is created as a file, a .agent file. No surprise to you there. So because it's created as a file, all of the things that apply to files within SharePoint equally apply to this agent. So therefore, I can control the access to the agent in the same way that I can control access to the files that the agent is using. And that's pretty much how you then manage access to the agent.
Brilliant. Thank you, James. There's a couple of questions there around, are we able to share the presentation and a copy of the recording? Yes, absolutely. And you're free to pass that on to the AI committee as you wish. Next question from Jill. So what is the difference between enterprise data protection and your data are not stored or shared with anyone, including Microsoft?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So I just, one thing that often comes up, I'm just going to zoom in slightly here. A couple of points here. So firstly, Microsoft used the word Copilot to describe many of their different AI products under the Copilot banner. We are talking today about Microsoft 365 Copilot. We are not talking about the Copilot edition that you get as a consumer that everyone in the world can get access to. That's something different. This is Microsoft 365 Copilot. And when we talk about enterprise data protection, you see I've got the little green shield there. And when you go into that, there is some Microsoft documentation, which I'll bring up, but I won't bore you with the details. But effectively, it talks about what it means. So a key principle is this, that your data isn't used to train foundation models. And that you can see here to do with access controls, your data is private, we secure your data. Now, I'm not going to comment on other AI tools and other competitive tools, but not all tools protect what you type in your prompt and the response that's given from the AI using that as a basis to train itself. So that's what I mean by enterprise data protection.
Brilliant. Thank you, James. Got another question here from Malcolm. Can anyone with a Copilot license create agents, or can that be restricted?
It can be restricted. So there's quite a lot of there are some considerations that you need to think about when you are planning your governance for your environment. So I'll quickly show this as an example. So one of the things that you would do is, if I go to my active users, so I've obviously got a Copilot license applied, but I'll probably regret doing this because I can never find them. Yeah. So one of the things I can do is turn off that. So I can give someone Copilot, but I can prevent them from using Copilot within SharePoint to build agents. But there's a few different things that you need to plan for in terms of what people can and can't do with Copilot. Again, depending on the licenses that you assign to them.
Brilliant. Thank you, James. Another question coming in. Do I need to license everyone for Copilot?
No. So a very common scenario would be that all users who have, say, a mailbox, you typically roll out this edition. So this Copilot chat, this is the free edition. I can pin it to my homepage. I can pin it to Outlook. I can pin it into Teams. And it's fairly common for people to say, let's roll that out to everyone, because at least it gives them an AI tool that we're happy for them to use because it provides the data protection. But when it comes to the other edition, most organizations look to do a pilot or a proof of concept with a smaller number of people to allow them to build up an understanding of their content and what it can do for them in their organization and what it can do for them on a daily, weekly basis. So no, typically people will roll out the Copilot chat to everyone, but then a subset of people for the paid for license.
Brilliant. Thank you, James. Got a couple of questions coming direct myself. So what if my files are stored on the file server from Sharon?
Well, it's not going to use them. So if you're predominantly still operating with a file server and you want Copilot to be able to respond to, I don't know, say employee policies and procedures, then the suggestion would be to move that portion of your content from your file servers into your Microsoft 365 environment. I mean, clearly, there's many benefits with moving your content from file servers into 365. You only have to look at the news every day to see cyber attacks and ransomware attacks to understand why you might want to do that. But although there are ways to use files that don't exist in 365 or content that doesn't exist in 365, it is easier if the content is in 365.
So, yeah, thank you, James. Question on the Q&A from Cliff. So SharePoint Advanced Management, Cliff has heard that you can use this if you have a Copilot license and no other license. Did Microsoft say that? He's not sure. So any word on that, James, at all?
Yeah, so what's being referred to there is there's a set of capabilities that Microsoft launched a few years ago under the banner of SharePoint Advanced Management, or SAM short. And a lot of these capabilities are there to allow organizations to understand and manage their content, not specifically for Copilot, but it does help for Copilot. And what Microsoft announced at the start of this year is that they will provide to each user who has a Microsoft 365 paid for Copilot license, a SharePoint Advanced Management license. So the principle being that if as an organization you're looking at deploying the paid for edition of Copilot, you'll get all of these tools that allow you to manage the governance and the protection of your content that you would have otherwise not had access to. So
yeah, sounds great.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you, James. A question in from Jill. So can you mark any areas of your own SharePoint or OneDrive as never to be used by Copilot? I love that question.
So there's a few ways of doing this. Again, it's something I'll cover in the next webinar. There's one way called restricted SharePoint search, which is basically I'm only going to allow Copilot to search for these named areas, right? So you have to name the SharePoint sites that you want Copilot to use. The other facility is called restricted content delivery, and that works the opposite way around. That says you can specifically exclude locations from Copilot to use. So one of them is very much a way of saying, okay, our content might be a bit of a mess, so I'm going to restrict everything apart from these up to 100 sites. The other one is more of a case of saying, I know that this content would never need to be responded to by Copilot, so I'm going to use this, what we call restricted content discovery. So there's two ways of doing it, and there's a couple of other nuanced ways of doing it depending on what you're looking at. So yes would be my answer. There's a few ways of doing it. It's just picking the right way for the scenario that you're looking to solve.
Brilliant. Thank you, James. Yeah, so the tool is all seeing, isn't it? So yeah, there's certainly some things you'd want to shield from that. So I think we've got time for a few more questions. So there's a few in the chat. If you create an agent, is an environment auto-generated? Again, great question.
Is an environment? I'm going to assume, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, you're talking about the world of Power Platform there in terms of where the environment sits.
That's what I assumed as well.
So I'm going to assume that's the case. So the way,
yes, that's confirmed.
So the way to think about it is you've got three types of agents, right? And apologies on behalf of Microsoft for making things confusing. You've got a Microsoft 365 agent, which are these ones that appear within the Microsoft 365 Copilot experience, right? It allows you to add agents into that experience. Those are managed in the same way that Microsoft Teams apps are managed. So if you know about those, they're the same. They don't require a Power Platform environment. The second type of agents are SharePoint agents, wherever my SharePoint site was. Those ones are managed as files within the SharePoint site. You don't need an environment for that. The third type of agents are agents that you develop with Copilot Studio. They're called custom engine agents, and you do need a Power Platform environment to put the agent into, in the same way that you do with Power Automate Process or a Power App Canvas app. Hopefully that answers your question, but it's probably one to have a separate conversation on. This might be a bit technical for this session.
Yeah, if you tick the follow up on the survey, we'll reach out and get one of our Power Platform leads to kind of run through that specific with you. But yeah, they'll come back with perfect on the response. So I think we've probably got time for our last question, James, and then I'll summarise and wrap up. It's another licensing one. Can I use agents if I don't have any Copilot license?
Yes, you can. However, the agent will have restricted functionality. So to give you a very quick example, if I say create an agent, I've got a new agent. In here, what will be restricted is the knowledge sources you can use. So if you do not have paid for license, you will only be able to use content that exists out in the public domain. I won't be able to search for SharePoint sites and SharePoint content, okay? I'll only be able to use content that exists on the public domain. And you also can't use some of these other features. So, I mean, great, Microsoft have made it kind of everyone can build an agent, but there is a slight bit of confusion over, depending on what you're licensed for, depending on whether you have pay as you go or not, that will dictate what your agent can actually do.
Brilliant. Thank you, James. And that takes us perfectly up to time. So just want to say big thank you to James for running the session, and thank you to everyone for attending. Really great conversations, great questions that have come off the end of that. Do sign up to the next series of webinar, next couple with James. Look forward to seeing you there. And other than that, have a great afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.